Okay, so re-recording this for a second time because after I rendered and uploaded the first time, it had no sound and I had already got rid of the file. So here we go again with John Gwynne's Malice. Malice is actually a book that I picked up a while back. I ended up just buying the entire series because I figured, why not? John Gwynne's super cool. I'm sure I'm going to enjoy this book and the series as a whole. So I dove in after my break with Red Rising. I had read 3 of those books in a row, and I wanted something a little bit different just to kind of, read 2 things simultaneously, throw in a book that's not Red Rising. So I read Malice, and I liked it a lot. Now, Malice, for those of you that don't know, is book 1 of the Faithful and the Fallen series. Those books right there. It is written by John Gwynne, and this is more of a traditional fantasy story, at least in the beginning. You get a lot of feelings of epic fantasy, lots of different kingdoms, a ton of characters, seemingly typical magic system, mythological creatures, worms, wolves, giants, things like that. So it was definitely a different pace for me coming off of Red Rising, where that was so heavy in sci-fi and action and relentless combat and violence and very grimdark setting. This is definitely not that kind of setting. It doesn't really give me a whole lot of grimdark vibes just yet. I do know that John Gwynne is pretty famous for killing characters that you love, so I'm sure there will be a lot of scenes like that. It never steps into that territory of grimdark. It's pretty standard high fantasy setting wise and feel wise, and Malice at least focuses very heavily on characters. Based on the back of the book, you see 4 characters. You see Evnis, Veradis, Nathair, and Corban, but the other 2 main POCs that you do have trickled into the story are Kywin and Castell. Now, I'd say Castell kind of takes a backseat. He doesn't have too many POV chapters in here. The main focus of the story is Nathair and Veradis. Veradis being kind of the bodyguard and friend of Nathair. Nathair is the Prince of Brenin. No, he's not. What am I saying? Nathair is the prince of a kingdom known as Tenebral, so his father obviously is the king at the start of this book. Veradis is his kind of loyal companion, his Samwise to his Frodo. Super loyal, almost to a fault. Anything Nathair does, he is attached to his hip. So Veradis' entire character really circles around Nathair's plotline, and Nathair comes to understand, at least in his mind, that he is the bright star, which aligns with this prophecy that was foretold prior to the story beginning, that a bright star will rise to combat the Black Sun and essentially save the world. So the Black Sun is obviously this blight on humanity. It's kind of the second coming of this god war. So you see all these signs coming together where there's, statues bleeding from the eyes, wolves are hunting in packs, you have giants, all these things are coming together, and Nathair comes to realize, again, in his mind, that he is the bright star. So everything that his character does in this book revolves around that plot. And, if you think you're the chosen one, everything that you do is for the sake of humanity. You get pretty full of yourself. So he is very idealistic. He is almost a little bit full of himself because, he thinks he's the chosen one, right? So everything he does, he almost doesn't think of it as like necessarily good or bad, but just and necessary because he is going to fulfill this prophecy. You also are introduced to Corban, who's a little bit younger. I forget his exact age, but he's early teens, I believe. And his older sister Kywin plays a big role in this book as well. And that is one of the POV chapters that I mentioned. So Corban starts out younger. He is not fully a man yet. He has not sat his long night or gone to the Rowan Fields, as it's known, which is essentially a warrior trial. So kind of typical fantasy, farm boy going through a warrior trial, becoming a man, becoming more involved in the plot. So that's the basis of his character. What's really cool about him, though, is that, and I don't really think this is a spoiler, he gets a wolf companion, which is super awesome. I'm not going to get into any other details than that, but he has a pet wolf. That's awesome. I love any kind of ranger-ish character that can speak to animals. Like, that's always my jam. Anytime I play an RPG, if I can do that, have a companion, whether it's a wolf, a rhino, a bear, whatever it is, that's super cool. And his older sister Kywin is kind of always there as, like, not his bodyguard, but she's always looking over him as, you know, his older sister, kind of helps him against bullies, which leads me to this character Rafe, who is a colossal ass of a person. He's just a bully for no reason. He is very quickly a hated character, and there's not much else to him. Like, you are going to hate this guy. He is a piece of human garbage. Kywin's really cool. She's a little bit more of a warrior. She's kind of like a badass. She uses throwing knives in combat. She doesn't take crap from anybody. She, I think, even not knocks Rafe out, but like hits him at some point. So she's awesome to follow. And Corban grows a lot in this book as well, because he gets kind of thrust into this war of the first book and has to be a man to be able to join it, essentially. So he's kind of thrust into that before almost he's even ready. And Evnis's character is the final POV of this book. It says it on the back that he will stop at nothing to gain power, and it's not really a spoiler. It's in the prologue. He becomes a servant of Azeroth, which is essentially Hades or the devil of this world. So, you know, you get a lot of dark versus light, good versus evil vibes here, and with that, Evnis is clearly going to be a bad guy, because the prologue talks about him drinking from this whatever cauldron or well of power, whatever it is, and becoming kind of a servant of Azeroth, which obviously is not a good thing. So if I'm understanding the prophecy correctly, he would be the Black Sun, and Nathair believes that he is the bright star, so I would assume that they're destined to battle at some point. If Nathair is actually the bright star, it could be someone else. I don't think he probably understands the prophecy as much as he thinks he does, but we'll see where the story goes. So naturally, with all these characters and all these kingdoms and all these lands, it can get a little bit confusing. This book definitely focuses heavily on character. At least the first third of the book is very heavy into the character work. So I did find myself slightly bored at times. There's a lot of descriptions of things going on and a lot of conversations without really moving the plot forward. So if you're a big character work kind of person and you love reading about characters and you don't care if the plot's a little bit slower, this book is going to be for you, right up your alley. For me, I kind of like a little bit better of a mix, or more so on the plot. I like to see things moving forward while being able to build your characters in the background. So that was a minor gripe that I had, is just I wish the first third of the book moved a little bit quicker. But I mean, once it gets going, it doesn't relent. Probably the second third of this book, the last 2/3 of this book were a blast to read, and the way that it wraps up sets up perfectly for the next book. I really loved John Gwynne's writing. It's an easy read. He does a really good job of kind of bringing you into the combat scenes, which I loved personally. And as a fan of the show Vikings, which I'm still actually currently watching, I was getting a ton of vibes from Vikings every time a battle happened in this book, because they're a little bit smaller skirmishes, much like Vikings. You have guys yelling shield wall constantly, which every time I heard that, I just picture Ragnar Lothbrok or somebody else yelling shield wall and all the soldiers slamming down, and just it helped me picture the battles a lot better. Because my other slightly minor gripe to the book was I couldn't always picture everything that was going on. Typically in books, I have a pretty good idea of like what I'm looking at, what the characters look like, and the descriptions weren't always necessarily there. So having some point of reference, at least from like a battle perspective, just kind of put me in the setting a little bit better. And I'd say as the book goes on, it gets a little bit easier, and I have a feeling that it'll get better throughout, because I do believe that this was his first book. I'm doing that a lot. I'm reading a lot of firsts for authors. If I'm wrong on that, I apologize, but I know that this foursome of books exists, and then there's Blood and Bone, the second series in the series of Faithful and the Fallen. So I'm sure every consecutive book is just going to be better. And this was a great first book to this series, don't get me wrong. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It was pretty good overall. I had minor gripes with it, but all the character work was fantastic because that was the focus of this book, so that was great. The battles were awesome. It's pretty violent at times. It never steps into grimdark, but there are some scenes for sure that, you know, are pretty gruesome. I love traditional fantasy settings. I love dragons. I love, you know, medieval settings of a story mixed in with magic. Like, that is right up my alley. So I'm sure I'm going to fly through the rest of these books, as gigantic as they are, because they're all 700 plus pages, and I think the third one's way bigger than that. We'll see. All the typical things that you're looking for are definitely here, as far as, you know, kind of politicking between kingdoms, a lot of backstabbing, betrayal. And as I said, with the character focus, John Gwynne does a fantastic job with friendships in this book. I mean, Corban and Kywin's brother-sister relationship is fantastic. Nathair and Veradis's bromance is fantastic. Veradis will go to bat for anything Nathair wants. Like, he is just his boy. Like, you need a friend like Veradis because he is true to Nathair to a fault. As far as side characters, there's a couple that I definitely enjoyed. Brenna, who is a healer, she's an older woman. She has a talking crow, which is kind of funny to me. She gets involved in Corban's plotline a good amount, and he has to kind of bring her herbs and, you know, help her make potions, things like that. But their interactions are always pretty funny. And I really love Gar. So Gar is the stable master and kind of takes Corban under his wing to help him train for his Rowanfield's test and his long night. And Gar is a very interesting character. I don't want to say anything beyond his introduction because I don't want to enter kind of spoiler territory. So I'll just leave with, I really ended up liking Gar. He's a side character, but he is super awesome. Something I did appreciate too, with stepping back to the combat for a second, was there's a few duels in this book, and John Gwynne did a great job of explaining in pretty good detail of like how these duels work, the actual combat that's happening, sword swipes, things like that. It's not something like I've heard of in the Wheel of Time, where there's like a stance that's used and that's the description. And if you know what the stance is, you know what kind of combat it is. John Gwynne actually takes his time to make it feel more, I guess, intimate, and talking about the actual like blade movements and blocking and parrying and slashing. So I love that. That is perfect for me when it comes to combat. I'm definitely looking forward to reading the following books, because everything I hear about this series is that Malice is so good and every book just gets better. And that's awesome, because I enjoyed Malice mostly, and the way it ended definitely has me all in for the second book at least. And if Valor is a step above Malice, I'm sure I'm gonna love it. And then I'm just gonna devour Ruin and Wrath, because once I get a hold of a good series, I'm not gonna let it go. I'm gonna see it all the way through the end. I hate not finishing books or series, so I will be here for the long haul. John Gwynne is a super cool guy on Twitter, on Goodreads. He'll respond to you even if he has no idea who you are. You reach out to him, you say something nice about his books, and he's right there saying, hey, glad you're reading it, I hope you're having a good time. And I'm always going to support any kind of author that does that, because that's awesome. So for those of you watching this that have read Malice, drop in the comments. I'd like to have a conversation about it. I love talking to people about the books that I read, so it'd be super cool to hear your thoughts, your opinions on things that you liked, didn't like, character arcs that you know, want to theorize about maybe, or something that I might have gotten wrong that you know that you picked up on during your read. Just let me know in the comments. If you like this content, please like and subscribe, of course. And until next time, everybody, keep reading.